Sometimes I wonder what echoed in the mind and heart and spirit of Jesus on a daily basis. Surely some of the things that James read at the beginning of the service are things that floated around in Jesus. God has told you, human one, what is good and what the Lord requires from you to do justice, embrace faithful love, and walk humbly with your God. Jesus did this, and so he probably had to tell himself to do those things, and we can do these things too. Probably he had ruminating inside of him the idea to speak out on behalf of the voiceless and for the rights of people who are vulnerable. Speak out in order to judge with righteousness and defend the needy and the poor. He did this, and so he probably had to remind himself and refresh himself in this call, in this responsibility and opportunity again and again. And we can do this too. Maybe he said to himself, having committed to memory, to heart, to spirit, some of the words that he was taught in the temple and with the faithful believers in his family and friendship circles. Maybe he repeated to himself, don't withhold good from someone who deserves it when it is in your power to do so. Don't say to your neighbor, go and come back, I'll give it to you tomorrow when you have it. He had to remember to do this, and we have to remember to do this. Stories of Jesus's life and stories of the people that he met float around inside of us as we have heard them, as they have been taught to us, as we have had them repeated to us over time in worship and in hymns and in prayers and in other ways. Maybe the story about the little boy with the loaves and the fish resonates with you when you think about what you have, and that sometimes it doesn't feel like enough, but if you give from what you have, it will be multiplied, and the Spirit will do something with our gifts. And if we take daily directives from the Holy, if it becomes second nature to us as we remember, I need to feed people, I need to be about justice, I need to share my loaves and share my fish, I need to do justice, I need to not withhold things from people, I need to speak out on behalf of the voiceless. If we repeat those things to ourselves over and over, they become second nature, and we just do them. We don't even really have to think about it or plan it, we just do it because the Spirit moves us to.
Good morning. This is the day of our annual Bread for the World offering of letters, and it is a way that our church joins with hundreds of other Christians around the United States to write to Congress about nutrition for people living in poverty in the US and around the world. I'm Cindy Changit-Levin, and I'm the Bread for the World volunteer organizer for our congregation. All year, I stay in contact with Bread for the World, learning about nutrition policy so that I can bring you the most timely messages that we should raise to our members of Congress. For years, our church has acted out our faith by raising our voices to feed hungry people in this way. And on behalf of Bread for the World, I thank you for your actions. I thank everybody who brought in so many bags of groceries to help with our demonstration, to help us visualize what's going on in our country right now. This year, we are part of Bread's 2-year campaign. It's an advocacy campaign called Nourish Our Future, and it focuses on policies to fight child hunger in the United States and around the world. Good nutrition is the bedrock for a healthy and impactful life. Without it, children face significant challenges, disrupting physical, mental, and emotional development. Some of the nutrition programs that we're going to talk about in a few minutes are in the news often these days because poverty fighting programs are under intense debate right now in Washington. So right now is the time for people of faith like us to speak out together. Here's some good news that you might have missed. We've already seen a significant policy victory this year for childhood hunger. In March, there was a continuing resolution in the budget that funds the government for the rest of this year. And it included a $550 million increase for the WIC program, the special supplemental nutrition program for women, infants, and children. We're going to talk about that more. That provides vital nutrition assistance to low-income women, infants, and children. So now, a week before we send two PUCC congregants, that's me and Allie Holloway, to Washington, D.C., each of us can write our own messages to our U.S. Senator and U.S. Representative, urging them to act compassionately for hungry people. So today after worship, we're going to all go to the gathering space out those doors where you'll find paper, pens, and talking points to write from so that you can write your own letters to Congress. Allie and I will deliver them in person when we go to DC next week for the 50th anniversary Bread for the World Summit and Lobby Day.
Today is Ascension Day in the church when we remember Jesus leaving the disciples. He was with them physically for 50 days after Easter, post-resurrection appearances, having conversations with them, feeding them, interacting with all of the people, reminding them of the things that they had experienced together, reminding them of the things that ruminated in him, reminding them of the things that guided him daily, those things like do justice, love kindness, do not withhold things from people who are in need, and share your loaves and fish. Ascension Day is that day when Jesus talks to the disciples one more time and says, I'm about to go, and he fades away from them. Maybe you've seen some artwork of Jesus going into the sky so that his physical presence is no longer with the disciples, no longer on the earth, but his spirit continues and remains. We like to imagine that the disciples were probably not thrilled with this idea of Jesus leaving them again, of realizing that now it's up to them. They no longer can watch him multiply the loaves and fish. They'll no longer be able to watch him talk about responsibilities and talk about God's dream of feasts for all people. They no longer can stand behind him, but they are the front line. They are the ones who need to make it happen. They're the ones that need to do this justice work, who need to make sure that nothing is withheld from people who are hungry. They're the ones that need to speak out for those who are voiceless, for those who are vulnerable. Yesterday, we were host to an event that trained people to go out into neighborhoods in our area and speak with everyday people about how they see their own story and how, because of proximity and learning about people's needs, learning about people's biographical sketches, learning about people's background, can help us to stand up for each other, to tell each other's stories, and to be more and more available to community and to our covenant responsibilities to each other. Every day we see opportunities to move out of this church, out into the world, to be Christ-like. Tomorrow there's an opportunity to be trained. Tomorrow in the evening, Tuesday during the day on a Zoom call, to be a faithful bystander, because we are witnessing things that are happening to people that should not be happening to people. And sometimes people don't have the wherewithal or the courage or the right words to say when they're being confronted or attacked in any variety of ways. And so one of the things we might consider is how to be a bystander that can intervene, whether that's in person or online, when you see someone being mistreated. There are opportunities all the time that we hear about how to be more equipped to be disciples in the world, to know that it's on us to speak up. It's on us to do the justice work. Jesus has removed his physical body from us, but his spirit remains and can guide us into being Christ-like in the world.
So I'm going to say a few words about global nutrition. There are soaring rates of severe malnutrition and famine that make it clear that we need to ensure that our country is funding global nutrition programs. UNICEF estimates that almost 45 million children under the age of 5 suffer from wasting. And that's a condition where a child is severely thin for their height due to poor nutrition. Nearly half of all preventable deaths among children under 5 are because of malnutrition. And yet we're only able to reach about a fourth of the kids suffering from wasting. Despite the progress over the last few decades, the world continues to lose more than 2 million young children to malnutrition every year. Most people living with malnutrition are concentrated in South Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa, and Central America, and the causes are rooted in and amplified by conflict, political instability, rising food prices, climate impacts, and of course, we're still dealing with the aftermath of COVID-19. So one of the things that you're going to see out there are requests from Bread for the World. We're asking Congress to provide robust funding for global nutrition in the federal budget. Before the USAID Department and infrastructure was dismantled, our country provided most of our global nutrition assistance through USAID, reaching more than 39 million children and women around the world. So we're asking Congress to provide funding and to provide ways for our government to disperse this aid to people who desperately need it.
So we heard the story about the Ascension, when Jesus was with the disciples and told them one last time that he would be leaving, but that the Holy Spirit would come to equip them and to empower them to do the work that he did, to continue to live out that vision for community, to continue to do works of justice, to speak up for those who are voiceless, and to be reminded that we should not withhold our gifts from each other. The second reading was from Ephesians, the city of Ephesus. It was an early church, and they were trying to figure out, how do we live Christ-like in the world? How do we relate with each other? How do we relate with people that are not like us? How do we relate with people who are outside of our system? Maybe even people who come from a different place, who are rooted and grounded in different traditions and cultures, languages, and understandings. And in that reading, you maybe heard James talk about power and greatness, and how power is conferred and energy is given, and how strength comes and God's power is at work, and Christ is above every ruler and authority and power now and in the future. And so there's a setting up here, trying to encourage the people at Ephesus, trying to encourage the people in the early church, trying to encourage the people in our day, that we have power and we have authority and we have skills and we have resources, and we must put them into practice. We must use the gifts that we have been given and call on the power of God, so that things can be different than how they are today, so that we can more closely align with how God envisioned community to be. Helen Keller said, "I am only one, but I'm still one. I cannot do everything, but still I can do something. I will not refuse to do the something I can do." And Teresa of Avila says, "You are Christ's hands." We have to imagine the disciples felt this way when Jesus left them. We have to imagine the early churches felt this way because they were hoping Jesus was going to come right back and spend time with them, but they had to become Christ for the world. Teresa of Avila says, "You are Christ's hands." Christ has no body now on earth but yours, no hands but yours, no feet but yours. Yours are the eyes through which to look out Christ's compassion to the world. You are the feet with which he is to go about doing good. You are the hands with which he is to bless people now. We have power, we have authority, we have skills and abilities.
So now turning toward hunger in our own country, I have a few words about the SNAP program. That's the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. Grocery prices have risen 25% since 2020, and families are spending more of their income on food than they have in 30 years. That's probably not news to some of you who have been grocery shopping. SNAP is the most effective tool available to prevent hunger in America. It helps over 42 million people afford food each month, and nearly half of these people are children. 80% of those who receive SNAP are families with children, seniors, and people with disabilities. SNAP benefits help people survive, but they don't give a lavish amount. We talked about how one bag is kind of represents what charities and churches can give, and there's a ratio of 1 to 20. bags that the government could give. But at current levels, the average daily benefit is just $6.20 a person per day. And that's not nearly enough to provide the nutritious diet that children need to survive, to thrive. So we want to protect what's being given. It would be great to have more, but this is what's at stake, is this low amount that helps people tremendously. SNAP is it helps individuals and families lift themselves from poverty. Provided support that helped 3.4 million people lift themselves above the poverty line in 2023. It helps a family eat when the breadwinner looks for the next job. It gives people nutrition while they recover from an illness that hurts their income. It stabilizes family and communities and prevents deeper hardship. It's a lifeline for millions of Americans working hard to survive in an economy that often leaves them behind. So, Bread for the World is asking Congress to reject budget cuts that would reduce the SNAP budget and take food from the tables of hungry Americans.
In a moment, Cindy's going to talk a little bit about one of SNAP's programs, and that's WIC, Women, Infants, and Children. We were a WIC family when we were fostering Dexter before the adoption came through. That was the place where he went for his immunizations. It's where his foster family, his first foster family that brought him home from the hospital, went to get the resources that they need. And as we sat in the waiting room sometimes, I imagined all of the children that were there, that were climbing on things and under tables, that were on their parents or had escaped from their parents. I imagined all those children as my children. All of those children are our children. They're the children that belong to us. They're the children that we must take care of, the children that we must feed. Fast forward some years, and I did some time on PTO leadership boards. And I remember saying to some of the parents that came to discuss certain things that these children are all our children, that we have to treat every one of them the same way, regardless of their family life, regardless of which elementary school they maybe came to for this middle school. We're blended now. We belong to each other. They're all of our children. And so we tried to remember every time we made a decision, every time we talked with the school district, every time we talked with the principal, all of the children are our children, and we want to make sure we're thinking about all of them when we make decisions about how to use our resources. I read a story this week about a teacher who was a young elementary school teacher. It was not in the United States, and she talked about how she needed some extra space, and she needed, because the schoolhouse was so small, she needed to branch out to find other places to bring her students sometimes when the school just seemed to get smaller and smaller and the walls closed in on them. There was a small Catholic church up the hill, and so some days they would go there on a little hike and they would spend some time there in the sanctuary. And she told some stories, and one of the students at one point said to her and to the other students, "This is my church, and you know, when you're old enough, you can come up here and kneel down, and the priest will feed you a biscuit if you've been good. If you've been good." Maybe you heard Wyatt earlier when we were talking about this food say, "Are we going to feed bad people too?" So there's this sense that we have in our denomination that we are welcoming people, that we are extravagant in our welcome and our hospitality. And we don't say, you can come to communion if you do this or if you don't do that. We don't put these restrictions on things because we think God's love is deeper and wider than we can imagine. And we're supposed to model that kind of love in the same ways. And so we are given a responsibility and an opportunity to look at the children locally and internationally as all of our children. And we need to take away the barriers that exist when people try to say, we're not going to feed those kids. Those kids aren't worth our time or our energy or our resources.
So, WIC, a special supplemental nutrition program for women, infants, and children. We still have hunger in America, but infants and toddlers with the wasting that I described before are nowhere to be found in the US today. This progress is largely due to a program called WIC. It's in 1967, Senator Robert F. Kennedy made a famous fact finding trip to one of the poorest regions of the country, the Mississippi Delta. He brought reporters and photographers with him, and one of the most searing images from that visit was of Kennedy cradling a toddler who was listless and he couldn't coax into responding to him. Now, all of us would recognize this child's condition as severe malnutrition that we associate with other countries. But before WIC became permanent in 1975, American children suffered this way too. Today, WIC is the premier U.S. public health nutrition program for pregnant women, mothers, and children up to age 5. In the past week, I've heard 3 people come to me and tell me that their families were on WIC, that I didn't know that before, but it didn't surprise me because last year the program served nearly 7 million participants last month, including, well, last year, 7 million participants, including 40% of all infants in the US. One of Bread for the World's first actions addressing American hunger in the 1970s was to help secure an expansion of WIC. And as WIC and Bread both turn 50 years old this year, we're asking Congress to recommit to fully funding WIC now and in the future, and to pass the modern WIC Act, which would strengthen the program through reforms that make it easier for families to enroll in WIC and access its vital assistance.
You might have noticed on the front cover of the bulletin a stacking of breads. You maybe have been here when we have celebrated Bread for the World Sunday with bread machines going, and you noticed with all of your senses when you walked in. You may have been with us in the past on World Communion Sundays, the first Sunday of October, when we had breads from around the world. Today we are using breads that come from Bridge Bread. Some of you maybe have an awareness of Bridge Bread in St. Louis. Their subtitle is Hope in the Baking. Bridge bread is the bread that we will receive for communion. It's a beautiful woven loaf. And then there are some breads out on the tables that you will be able to sample and enjoy. Bridge Bread is a nonprofit bakery that offers hope and dignity and restorative employment and financial housing assistance to people who are transitioning out of homelessness. Bridge Bread Bakery is a social enterprise, which means that all of their money goes back into society. And they're a nonprofit social enterprise because their social program is the work that they do. So the people that they employ, the hope that they give, is used directly to try to solve the problem of hunger. And they have incredible success. Certainly not everyone comes out of the struggles that they've been in. Sometimes they have to cycle through again to get more support and more encouragement, more of a grounding, more grace, and more hope. But it is for us to find the people and the places that are doing this important work so that we can be part of solutions, so that we can do more than just complain and notice the things that don't seem right, but so that we can engage and partner with people who have the kind of love and the kind of vision that we have.
We're coming closer to my favorite time, which is turning our faith into action. Out in the gathering space, you're going to find pens and talking points to write from so that you can write 3 short letters, one to Senator Hawley, one to Senator Schmidt, and one to your U.S. representative. And if you don't know who your U.S. representative is, we're going to have volunteers with name tags to look that up for you, name tags saying need help. So just ask for a little bit of help. You can write something about what you learned here in worship. You can use the wording in the talking points on the table. You can write something about what you've seen in your own life, about why you personally care. What makes our letters so special from our church is when the offices can read the individual thoughts of constituents. What we're going to ask, you'll see on those yellow pieces of paper, the request lines. We ask that you keep those the same so that we're all requesting the same thing. No one has to write anything that they don't want to. If you don't agree with a particular request that's on the sheet, pick a different one. And if you don't care for the talking points, share your favorite Bible verse about why Christians believe in justice and feeding hungry people. If you have difficulty physically having trouble with handwriting, our volunteers with the name tags also have pre-written letters that they can give you. Also, if you're just really busy and you don't have much time, they can give you, and you can just write in your name and address so you can be included too. Zoom people, if you're watching on Zoom or if folks don't have time to stay today, you can still participate. Folks at home can scan the QR code in the bulletin, and it'll take you to a website where you can email your members of Congress. Just please write Parkway United Church of Christ in St. Louis on the web form so that your letters will be counted with ours. And you can take those talking points home on the yellow sheets, and you can bring them next week, and we'll bless all the letters during that time of worship. Allie and I, like I said, will deliver them in person when we go to Washington, D.C. next week for the 50th Bread for the World Summit and Lobby Day. Other resources that you can find out there are info sheets about WIC and about global hunger. I also hope that you'll take home a half sheet about next steps. So if you have friends and family at home, you can take materials at home so they can write too, and you can bring their letters here on Sunday. We invite everybody to call Congress on June 11th when Allie and I are on Capitol Hill to make our voices even louder. And do think about joining Bread for the World to take all these actions and learnings all year long. And think about next year, because our church, Parkway UCC, has a goal of sending 3 people to next year's Bread Summit in DC. So maybe you'll be one of them. Thank you.
So as we draw closer to our communion table, an open table, we invite all to receive this sacrament. I want to align again with this theme that Bread for the World is using for these 2-year period, nourish our future. When I think about communion, I often think about the past. I often think about Jesus gathered at the table with his disciples and the conversation that they had. I like to also imagine, especially today, that we are also doing a future thing when we gather at the communion table. We're nourishing our future, and we're kind of dreaming the kind of future that is possible when we focus our energies, our power, our authority, our voices, our actions for justice, the reminder that we are not to withhold gifts from each other, this reminder that we are intended to move toward each other, set each other free, and partner with each other, that we're nurturing the future, this kind of dream, like the kind of world that we want to live in. As we nurture our bodies, our minds, our spirits, our relationships, we are trying to create the kind of path, the kind of possibility that can come when we focus on being Christ-like with the ways that we live, with the ways that we speak, with the ways that we act.